All right, here we go. Another Square Dance Callers Talking. Tonight we're going to New Jersey. I have Betsy Gotta talking to me tonight. How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I appreciate you doing this. We've never had the opportunity to speak. I've seen you at several caller labs and conventions and what have you. And I've always wanted to get your ideas about calling and some of the stories that you have. So let's start off like I do with everybody. When did you start dancing?
Well before you were born.
Okay.
I the guy who taught my parents to dance had a program for children in the YMCA in Metuchen, New Jersey, and I was 5 going on 6 when I started in that program.
Okay.
And what we do now didn't exist then. We did what we would call old time dancing now. So, and I just loved it. I always liked it, and I went with my parents to. I'm an only child, so I went with my parents for several years to a dance camp that was first in New Jersey and then moved to Kentucky, now it's called Kentucky Dance Institute. And
Mhm.
they did square dancing and round dancing and contra dancing and international folk dancing and anything that was at all connected with the square dance world. And so that's how I grew up. Basically, I still go contra dancing. As long as my legs hold out, I'm going to go contra dancing
Okay.
because it's much more physical than squares.
I agree with that. I've played around with it at conventions. I've never actually learned it, but I have a lot of fun trying it. Now, you said you started that in New Jersey. I should have asked, where are you now? Where do you live?
I'm in New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey all my life except when I was in college. And of course, that was only part-time in Maryland.
Okay. Maryland and New Jersey. Okay. So you started dancing, I mean, very young, 5, 6 years old,
Yep.
doing all forms of dancing. What kind of pulled you in toward square dancing and square dance calling?
Well, my parents, square dance that was their major activity. They did some of the others, but their major activity was square dancing. So I went along with them. And when I was a little kid, uh, when I was a little kid, basically, if I wasn't dancing with my dad, there was nobody for me to dance with. I made a big, I was at the Washington Area Festival, the Wasca Festival, and I made a big round sign that I wore saying, "I can dance, ask me." It didn't work, but it got us some attention. And
Nice.
at the Kentucky Dance Institute, there was a caller school, and one year when I was about 11, my mother had broken her ankle going. They picked me up at my square dance and we were going to their club, and it was the winter time, and she slipped on the ice and broke her ankle. So she couldn't go in the summer to the Kentucky Dance Institute. I went with my dad. He went to the caller school. I went along. So I called my first dance, and I'm saying dance, I mean an individual dance. I do not mean a whole evening of dancing. An individual dance. It was an old time dance called Chase the Rabbit. And the guy who taught the caller school was then a very famous caller named Ricky Holden. And as Tony said about several people, you never heard of him, but he taught the caller school, and I called this dance, and I was successful. And I still went outside, and from tension, I was crying for like 15 minutes. And I said, "Oh, I'll never do that again. Not ever." But then the national convention in Miami in 62, there was a girl caller there. She was probably about 16, and she had a la-di-da, I can call attitude. And I was dancing with a cute boy I wanted to impress. So I looked at him and I said, I could do that.
Oh, wow.
And now, mind you, I think the girl got married at 18 and that was the end of her calling career. I never saw the boy again because in 62 there was no email, uh there was no internet. Phone calls cost the earth if they were long distance.
Mhm.
And so I never saw him again, but my dad had a teen club, and I went back and started calling a tip a night at the teen club. There were actually 3 callers who came out of that teen club.
Who do you know who they were?
Yeah, John Sweeney
Hmm.
and me and Bob. It'll come to me.
Okay. So now, with your dad being a caller too, who were some of your influences early on?
Well, my dad, of course, but
Hmm.
there was a woman caller in New York State named Beulah Samick, so I listened to her because, of course, back then women callers are not well accepted,
Okay.
and a young woman caller, forget it.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've been around for a little while, but and of course, I've met probably just as many women now as some men from all over. But yeah, I've heard about it how it used to be for sure.
Oh yeah, and I mean we're still only about 10 or 12% of Callerlab,
Hmm.
so it's still kind of a guy's world.
It seems like it, but that's why when I went to Callerlab, I was like, wow, because I'd only met a few of the guys around here, and we didn't have any women callers in this area. Um, and we have 2 or 3 now in Georgia that I know of. But so you kept on going after it, and also with all the dancing you did, how high a level do you dance in square dancing?
I dance C3,
Wow, see
3B.
through. Where you be great. And so you call up to that level also?
Yeah, I'm,
Okay,
but I'm not as good up there. I am
okay,
very good. My home club is mainstream,
okay.
and I love mainstream. I'm very good at mainstream. I'm very good at plus. I'm very good at advanced. I'm very good at C1. I'm good at C2, and I'm adequate at C3A and C3B. I have the knowledge because I dance it, but
Hmm.
if I'm calling tips like that, uh, I will write my material. I will take it to my workshop group, and they will tell me if there's any glitches in flow and stuff like that. So it's acceptable.
That's great.
I'm not gonna try it out on the floor because dancers at C3 are sophisticated. They're more sophisticated than some of the callers who try and call to them.
I'm sure. Wow.
So you don't take a
That,
chance.
that's beyond my. I can't conceptualize C3, even C's, because I've never even taken. I've taken advanced, but haven't even touched C's. That's
Well, it
impressive.
only took me 30 some years to get there.
Okay,
It's not like I learned it overnight.
I'm sure. Now calling up that high, and I know that really gets into the choreography and the pattern and all that. Do you think of yourself more? Do you like doing choreography or do you like singing calls?
Yes.
What's kind of your thing?
Yes.
Both. Okay, that's what I was
Both.
hoping for. Very
Both.
nice.
I
Okay.
my primary my primary working is our home club is mainstream.
Mhm.
I call for Independent Squares, the gay club in Philadelphia, and for them currently, I'm they have a unique class system. They have uh, on Tuesday nights they have their club meeting for classes or workshops,
Mhm.
and they try and please everybody. They have 2 halls going. There are 2 callers working. We alternate tips so that we cover mainstream plus advanced and C1. And the other caller is I believe he's workshopping plus and teaching advanced. I'm teaching mainstream and workshopping C1 in alternating tips. And what happens is the dancers can go back and forth. So that like the challenge dancers, a lot of them will go over and they'll angel the advanced class, and the plus dancers will come and angel the mainstream class. And so it's like every 15 minutes we change. And we synchronize our watches at the start of the at or our computers at the start of the night.
That is fantastic. That is great.
But
So,
but
go ahead.
the reason I'm doing mainstream and C1 is because they know I like working with the new people. And for a while, Mike Jacobs called for them for a while. And when he died, they needed somebody to. I was happily teaching their mainstream and plus classes. And when Mike died, they needed somebody to do the advanced and challenge, so they got that. But when they got another caller who could do advanced and some C1, they gave me back the mainstream.
That's great, Betsy. That's fantastic. Now, how you call every night? How often do you call with
On
your clubs?
Mondays to Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, some side four nights a week maybe.
Oh, I got you.
3 or 4 nights or 5. And then I pick up some beginner dances. I picked up recently some beginner dances at senior centers in the daytime.
Okay. Very nice. Okay. What's some of your favorite singing calls? Do you have any?
Uh there was just one that came out a while ago. Um Sunshine Revival.
Okay.
Corey Geisenhower recorded it. I can't think of what label it's on though.
Sunshine. I'll check it out in a little while. Sunshine Revival.
It's by a Hawaiian singer named Henry Capono, and it's
Okay.
just as happy as anything.
Wow. I will have to look into that.
They go down to the beach and they have a party, and it's a sunshine revival every Sunday
Haven't
afternoon.
heard it yet. I will absolutely
Oh,
check
you
that
got to
as soon
look
as
it
we
up.
get done. I will. I'll
It's
do that
fun.
tonight.
And I had blah, 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 blah. A Wade Driver had donated to the Callerlab Foundation
Mhm.
chance to record, so I just did one on rhythm called "Somebody's Thinking About You."
Okay. Somebody's thinking.
It's kind of a nice, gentle song.
Okay. I'll check that one out too. Yep. I remember that when they gave that away. Speaking of that, so we were talking right before we got on. You're what are you doing with Caller Lab now? What committee are you on?
I am the chairman of the Caller Training Committee.
Okay. And what do you do with the caller training committee?
Well, we try and come up with ways to help newer callers.
Okay.
There's we wrote we had they had written a while ago a starter kit for new callers,
Mhm.
and we looked at it and went, "This is way too hard. This doesn't." It gave all the stuff that callers need to know,
Mhm.
but it was so overwhelming. It's like when new callers go to caller school and they're brand new, it's like we turn knowledge on them like a fire hose, and
Yep.
they're really overwhelmed. And so that's what the starter kit was. So we revised it, and um, Kip Garvey worked on it, and oh heck, it'll come to me in a minute. I can picture him. Daryl Clendenin worked on it. I worked on it. Dottie Welsh worked on it, and part of the premise, it still gives a lot of information, but part of the premise now, or the premise now, is we're going to take you step by step to call your first guest tip at a club, like when they have an amateur night.
That's
This
awesome.
is what you want to do to do some patter, step by step to do patter. This is what you want to do for singing calls.
That is a great that's something I could have certainly used when I was starting out a few years back. Because like you said, I just started going to caller schools,
Yeah.
and everybody it's all kind of the same, but then everybody has a different approach to how do you get to the corner and how do you address a singing call. Everybody's going to be a little different. So yeah, what you're talking about is fantastic, and I can see where somebody just coming in would love something like that.
And
Just getting
a
you to your
while
first
ago,
tip.
we also had um, a group together that wrote a guideline for how to mentor other callers, because not everybody is close to a caller coach, and not everybody, and sometimes people are afraid to approach a caller coach if they need mentoring, and we're not all that scary, but we believe that other people don't necessarily.
I
So
understand.
there's a guideline to help people, after you tell them, okay, go online, look for musicforcallers.com, find a piece of music and download it. Now practice that. Now do it at the club. What else? Where do you take them then? And this gives some guidelines for that.
Oh, that's great, Betsy. Very nice. Yeah, I got lucky enough. The gentleman that really got me going, he's passed away, but then somehow I got I got involved with Ken Ratusi. He had a school down here, and I helped him kind of get it organized because he was close to me. And I didn't even know those things existed until then. And since then, I've done a ton of them with the GSI schools and all the other ones out there. So I'll thank you right now for just doing that, just putting it together for new callers. That's fantastic. And also, you were on the board of governors. How long were you on the board of governors, Callerlab?
Let me think. There's 3-year terms, 24 years.
Wow.
What I did was because I went to the Kentucky Dance Institute and had background in different parts of square dancing, I looked at the board and they all had the same exact interests. And I could represent people who danced advanced or challenge. I could represent people who danced community dance or Contra, and I didn't see a lot of females on the board. In fact, I was the second woman to serve on the board.
Okay.
First American. The first lady who served on the board of governors was a Canadian lady.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I started running, and it took a while, and I got some advice from people who thought I would be a good fit, but it took a while, and I had to keep pushing and keep running over a few years before I got elected.
Okay.
And they kept talking. People keep talking about, and they probably still do, about, oh, it's always the same people on board. It's always and it was hilarious. It's always the good old boys on the board. And I was a good old boy, and I was on the board, and I served 4 terms, and they talked about term limits, and there were pros and cons, and I finally said, I'm going to step off. I'm at the end of this 4th term, I'm stepping off the board, and I'm stepping off for a full year. And if I've done a good enough job at the end of a full year, I'll run again, and they'll reelect me. And if they don't reelect me, that's fine, because I've had my say. So I stepped off for a full year around 2000, and then I ran again, and I got elected and ran and did another 4 terms, and then I said, I'm going to step off for a year, and I'm still off.
Okay.
Because other people who represented what I felt I had to represent have been elected to the board. It's much more diverse.
Fantastic. Okay. I agree. Like I've been in Callerlab 10 years now, I think, and I've seen a few changes in that round, and with the board and everything else. And I love Callerlab. I'm kind of glad I got involved with that. Luckily, the gentleman that introduced me to square dance calling was a member of Callerlab, so that's why I went that direction.
Yeah. Do you know that back when it started, it was invitation only?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'd heard that on one of my podcasts. I had no idea.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
That, and there was almost, and you had to do so much to stay on there, and gosh.
Oh, and early on, you've heard stories. Early on, they were talking about accredited callers. You had to meet a standard, and everybody was sure that if we set standards, they were going to be the 1 or 2 people who were going to lose out and lose their membership because they wouldn't fit the standard. So this was debated and debated and debated. And I'm sitting there in a meeting, and I don't sit quietly in a meeting. And this was not the board. This was a general populace, in the whole Callerlab meeting. And I'm sitting there, and I don't sit quietly well. So I was embroidering. I was working on a shirt for a friend of mine. And at some point during this whole discussion, guy in front of me turned around and said, "You're the only person in this room who's accomplishing anything."
Oh, that's good.
Because we were just going around and around and around.
Oh my gosh. It's a great story. Well, I do want to thank you for all the stuff you did when you were on the board of governors, and now with the caller training committee. About you, so Callerlab's a big part of your life. How much have you traveled calling? I imagine you've been all over the world. Where all have you gone?
I'm much more of a regional caller. than
Okay.
world famous. I have gone overseas, but I'm not the Tony Oxendine and the Jerry Story or whatever who gets hired overseas. I have gone overseas and gotten calling and done calling, but
Mhm.
I I don't necessarily get hired there.
Gotcha.
No, I got asked for when they did a mini caller lab in '94 in England. They could ask the group that sponsored it could ask for certain people, and I was invited to go there. So I've called over there. I called in England. I have gone on vacation in Germany back before that and called in Germany. We went to Australia, we being me and my husband Roy, we went to Australia in 2018. And Roy just dropped a hint to, it'll come to me, Barry Wanson that, oh, Betsy Gotta, a Callerlab Accredited Caller Coach is coming on vacation to Australia. Maybe she should do a caller school. And so I did about a 3-day caller workshop.
Oh, that's outstanding. Very nice. Very nice.
And now, and Roy is a round dance leader, and so I hold dual citizenship. I'm also a member of Round the Lab, and Roy did a 1-day seminar in Australia also. So we could write off of both of our
I was
airfares.
like, say that's a great trip there. You can't beat that. That's nice. Oh, now with those travels and calling regionally too, um, do any venues or anything like that stand out to you? Places that were really that you liked the way they looked, or crowds, or anything like that in all your travels?
No, I remember some things that stood out for being kind of nightmares.
If you don't mind, what are some of those?
Uh, Armory.
Okay.
I called in Fayetteville, Arkansas many years ago, and it echoed. It was promenade, aid, 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 aid. And they were such nice people, and they were doing their best to do everything. And there have been some national conventions where the there was one national convention where they had planned to build um, uh, walls to divide a room to the ceiling. And then the fire marshal said they couldn't do it. So the walls only went up so far. Well, the central hall was the big hall that had the Ghost Riders in it.
Oh gosh.
Could you hear on any of the other sound halls?
I
No.
didn't think so.
And
Gosh.
there was another, and I'm carefully not naming which venue it was because they
Okay,
were
that's
doing
fine.
their
That's
best.
fine.
And there was another national convention that put the sound out for bids. And the winning bid was not a square dance group. It was a rock and roll. It was a rock. They sounded rock and roll concerts, and
Oh,
we were loud, but you couldn't understand us.
yeah. Oh gosh.
So some of those, it's like, oh my gosh, we survived. I
Yeah.
was I was coming. I was going to call in C2, then the first one where they didn't have the walls up far enough. I was going to call C2, and the people in C2 were very nice people, but they really were not good C2 dancers. And what they could hear, they really could not perform. So another caller was coming off the stage, a guy named Bill Ackerman from Massachusetts, I believe. And I knew he would know this, and I said, I wish I could remember the Latin for "We who are about to die salute you." And of course, he came up with it,
No kidding. That's
which at
awesome.
least made me smile to start. So I came up. This was going to be a nightmare, and I just came up with a smile on my face because we made a joke about it, because that's how you have to survive.
That is great. Yeah, that's when I was talking about doing this podcast. I mean, it's stuff like that, those stories. I mean, because they're not all great venues, and it's nothing that the venues can help. Sometimes it's just like you said, they can't build the wall, so you deal with what you got,
Yeah.
and that's a rough go.
Oh
Any
yeah.
more stories like that?
Well, Tony was telling stories about when he was young. I can go back and tell you about my first full evening of calling.
Let's do it.
Uh, I was probably 16. in New Jersey, you had to be 17 to get a driver's license. So I did not drive. We lived an hour south of where the club was, and my dad was sick. He called for the club. It was a Rutgers University campus club. It's still around. That's our home club. Is called Rutgers Promenaders. That's the State University of New Jersey. It
Mm-hmm.
started on campus, and it's now off campus, but it's still dancing. We will celebrate our 70th anniversary on June 2nd.
Wow, that's fantastic. Okay.
And so here we are. My dad was the caller. He was flat on his back in bed with a cold, nasty cold. So my mom drove me up there. I'm now 16. I've been calling for a couple of years, but I hadn't ventured into patter. I had all singing calls. And and now I'm petrified because these are college students. They're older than me. Oh my gosh. And we I had the same cold. So doing singing calls, and the college students were happy to dance to anybody. They didn't care. And after every two singing calls, we took a break, and that was a tip. And my mother had gone out. This place where we danced was called Gibbon's Cabin, and it was a social place on a campus, and they had a kitchen. So my mom kept making me hot tea, which I took with lemon drops, so I could clear my throat because I had the same cold. And every time she went out to the kitchen, she tripped over a couple or disturbed a couple who were necking on the stairs, and she didn't understand why they didn't move. And halfway through the dance, I was done. I had called everything I knew, so I started over. I called everything again until the end of the dance.
Oh gosh, Betsy, that's a great story.
That was my first full-length dance.
Mm-mm.
Later on, my dad still had the teen club, and I was a little older, and he was hired to do dancing as part of therapy for people with learning disabilities.
Okay.
And it would be very, very, very beginner, and they had helpers and everything like that. But it was the night that the teen club danced. So I called for the teen club, and the admission was 50 cents, and I got paid in quarters.
Wow. Gosh, that's
It
good.
was heavy.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's great. Paying quarters.
It wasn't a lot of money, but it was a lot of quarters.
Oh, oh. So,
And
go ahead.
I said I got into calling to impress a cute boy.
Hmm.
Well, I never saw him again, but I met my husband when his girlfriend brought him to lessons on campus. Now, mind you, she broke up with him first,
Okay. Okay. That's
and
good.
he dated several women in the club before he settled down.
Okay. Now, how long had he been? Was he doing rounds then, or did he get into rounds after y'all were together?
After we were together,
Okay.
and we got into rounds, somebody at it, I got into calling regularly at Rutgers in 1969. Before that, my dad was still calling for them, but before that, they started. They'd put out a notice in the college newspaper, and they'd announce a meeting, and my dad would, he'd do the calling, and he'd just teach them what they were going to do in the tip. There were no lessons.
All right.
And some of the people wanted to, well, in 1969, some of the people wanted to go visit clubs in northern New Jersey, and they had lessons. So my dad didn't want to call another night, so he gave me the lessons. And so I started teaching for the club in 1969. And basically, I was teaching for the club, and then my dad and I shared the calling at the dances. And then some other guy was interested in rounds. So he was doing a few rounds, and we came back one September after summer break, and we looked around and said, "Where's so-and-so?" And we don't even remember his name. This is like 45 years ago. We
Yeah.
don't remember his name, but it's, "Where's so-and-so?" "Oh, he graduated, got a job, and moved to Syracuse."
Oh wow.
"Well, who's going to do the rounds?" "Why doesn't Roy do the rounds?" Roy says, "Why should I do the rounds?" And the answer was because we were the only couple that knew how to round dance, and I had the calling equipment.
Well, that certainly makes it easier.
Yep.
Gosh. So he kind of got into that. That's a great part there right there.
It was an arm twist.
I'm telling you, that's very good. Well, now, so you and your husband round dancing and the square dancing and all that. If it's
Yes.
not square dance music, what's your genre of music? What do you like?
Classic rock.
Classic rock.
And
Fantastic.
also we have the Sirius
Hmm.
music in the car. I will listen to classic rock. I listen to Margaritaville station. I
Hmm.
listen and then I'll listen to outlaw country because you can hear stuff that they don't regularly play anywhere
Yeah.
else.
No, that's good, Betsy. I had no idea. That's fantastic. I love that. Especially being from New Jersey, I didn't think you'd be outlaw country. That's great.
Oh, then I'll share one more thing with you.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
a, I'm a New Jersey closet bluegrass fan.
Oh, that's
I
great.
listen I listen to bluegrass periodically on the yeah. Now, mind you, I have like I think it's five. Yeah, they have the different channels, and you can put up
Mhm.
to five stations on a channel. I think I have five working channels, so I listen to a lot of other stuff too
Yeah.
when I get bored.
I asked too, especially with accredited caller lab coaches and caller coaches, what advice do you have for a caller, whether it's somebody just starting out or somebody who's got 10 or 12 years in trying to just keep at it?
Make sure that make sure that you get feedback from trusted people, so that you because we have egos. All of us have egos, or we wouldn't be standing there on the stage behind a microphone. And we can think that we are, sometimes we can think that we are better than we are. And we will put down the fact that we weren't hired, we'll put it down to somebody's prejudice or somebody likes somebody else. Make sure you get honest feedback so you can continue to improve. If you've learned one way to do something, learn another way. When I'm teaching caller school and we're teaching like resolution, you want the new callers to make a two-faced line. Well, one caller finds a way to make a two-faced line. Don't you know every other caller uses that way until we take it away from them? So make sure you find different ways to do things and keep yourself fresh. And there are callers who call for like 20 years and they always are improving, they're changing things, they're looking for new music. And there are callers who call the same dance for the 20 years. There's
Yes,
a
ma'am.
there's a
I
guy,
have seen that.
I think he's recently retired now in New Jersey, who was still using records and bragged that he hadn't bought one in 25 years. That's not the way you should be. You should
I
continue
agree.
to improve your craft.
Yeah. Yeah, I've run up on a few of those in the few years that I've been doing it, sure. So, oh, that's great stuff. Betsy, is there anything that we have that I didn't that I'm not going to know to bring up that you want to talk about yourself?
I,
Any more stories? Go right ahead.
any more stories?
Sure.
Well, I could tell him about the guy who tried to steal my tape recorder.
Absolutely.
It was a Marantz Super Scope.
Yeah. Okay, this is 1980.
Okay.
I'm about to call an open house for a singles group named Solitaires, which I thought was a very clever name.
That is good. Yep.
Okay. And the venue was right next to the city of Newark, New Jersey. Now, Newark is not the greatest area in the entire world,
Okay.
but this was a church next to Newark, so it was okay. So I go up there and I found the church. I was early because it was the first time I'd called at this venue. And now I'm wearing a square dance skirt, but no crinoline because you can't drive with a crinoline, especially if I drive a manual transmission still. And hey, the crinoline you step on the clutch and the brake, and the crinoline's caught in the steering wheel.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
I'm driving, but I had a skirt and stockings and little, Mary Jane dance shoes. Okay. And so I got out of the car and found the venue and everything's good. And somebody was there early and they were helping me in with the equipment. And I went back for the crinoline. And I had a Marantz Super Scope, really nice, um, tape recorder playing new singing calls over I was over on a strap over my shoulder. So that was the way I learned new singing calls. I listened to them over and over and over and over and over. My poor mother, when I was younger, I back in the day when I was playing 45s, you took the stereo, you put the arm back, you dropped the needle on the 45, and it just played and played and played and played and played. And I wasn't consciously listening to it. My poor mother had to listen to it. But I learned it that way. But anyway, I'm playing new singing calls, and this kid jumped the fence into the parking lot and came up to me, and I had no idea of anything was going to be wrong. So I looked him in the eye. He was a little taller than I was and very young. And I said, "Can I help you?" And he didn't say anything for the whole entire time. He grabbed the tape recorder. Whereupon I said the absolute stupidest thing that I've ever said in my life, which was, "You can't do that, give it back." Of course, he wasn't going to do that. So I grabbed the thing. Now, I had been getting the criminal out of the car, and it was in a bag, and he grabbed the bag and threw it down, and that didn't distract me at all, because I can buy another one of those. I want that tape recorder. And I grabbed the tape recorder, and he got it away from me, and we were between two parked cars. So he got it away, and he turned to run, and I'm thinking, great, I'm in my 30s. He's a high school kid. I'm not athletic. He's going to outdistance me as soon as we clear the cars. So I leaped in the air, and I tackled him. And I brought him down. And I'm going, well, great. Now what do? I never expected to hit. So I was really mad. So I tried to grab his hair and pound his head on the ground. And he had short hair, so I couldn't get a grip. So then, and I was very proud of this at the time, I'm thinking on my, well, not on my feet, because I was more on my knees, but I thought, well, if I hit him in the throat with my side of my fist, I'll hurt him more than I'll hurt my hand. So I did. And he didn't like that. So he got up and he ran away again. And he still had the tape recorder. So I ran after him. And it was like, he turned around and it was like, "Here, lady," but he never said a word, and he threw it at me. And it fell on the ground.
Oh, I don't think I'll hear a story to top that one.
And I picked it up, and I gathered up my skirt, and I put all the little pieces in the skirt, took the tape recorder and walked in. And then I noticed I was bleeding from the back of my leg.
Wow. Was that just a scratch? What happened?
No, he had stabbed me. Probably when I tackled him. But I never saw the knife.
Oh, my God. Oh, I'm a police officer. I don't have stories like that. That is so good.
So half an hour later, when they didn't stop the bleeding, because they didn't have any gauze, so I'm walking around with, four Band-Aids and pressure on the wound, and it wasn't stopping it. I ended up in the hospital, and but I'm busy setting up and instructing the club president how to call a beginner dance. So just have them circle left, circle right, swing, promenade, and do-si-do. That's all you need.
Oh my God. Betsy, I had no idea. That is amazing.
But I still have the tape recorder, and it works. It was fixable.
You still have?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, go ahead. Pop in, Roy.
Okay. A lot of people ask me how I stayed married for 50 years. Fear.
I can imagine. She's got a knife wound. That's awesome.
But there was adrenaline. I never
I'm
felt
sure.
it.
Gosh.
I mean, if I'd seen the knife, I probably would have reconsidered.
Wow. Well, you can put to bed the part about not being athletic. I think you proved that you're athletic in that regard. Oh my gosh. Oh.
Oh, and then after I got out of the hospital, I was calling for a group the next Monday. It was a neat idea. It was called Catch All Eights, and what they did was they put out an ad, an invitation to all recent graduates who hadn't followed up and joined the club.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, instead of them having to go through lessons again, they were just going to do a workshop. I'd call until I found something that somebody didn't know, and then we workshop that, rather than having to start over from the beginning to try and gather these people into the club. And so I'm calling for them, and I came in with a crutch and a bandage and a stool to sit on, and they're going, "What happened?" And I told them the story, and I looked at them and I said, "Now you guys are going to do what I say tonight, aren't you?"
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, and Roy reminded me that that particular program got about 6 squares back into the activity over a couple of years.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Betsy, I'll say this: like before we started this, I told you that I'd seen you at conventions and all. We've never had the opportunity to talk. I had no idea who you were, other than I'd seen you talking on a microphone, and I had no idea it was gonna. This is fantastic. This is. Oh.
Oh, I need
got stabbed story and still continue to instruct people on how to call your dance. Oh my gosh. That's professional right there.
And I did mention earlier in our conversation before we recorded that I had been to every national since 1961, because my parents took me, and I just got hooked on the nationals. It was back then, especially in the youth room, it was like a giant party, because again, we didn't have internet, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have Skype or whatever. We couldn't communicate, so we got to see these friends once a year. Mm-hmm. And all the youth just gathered and got to see each other. But I've also hold a record, which I claim is a record of either stubbornness or stupidity. I'm not sure which. I have called at every U.S. national since 1963.
Wow.
And the reason I say it's a record for stubbornness is because each committee is separate and they all do things their own way. So each time you sign up, you hope that somewhere somebody's heard you from this committee, so they'll give you a decent spot.
Yeah. Yep. Oh gosh. So on that, talking about, you're going to be in Wisconsin this year. I can't imagine you'd miss that one. Okay. And you're going to be at Callerlab this weekend, actually.
Yes, I'm.
Next week.
Actually, I'm heading out. I'm heading out Wednesday. Roy and I are heading out Wednesday because we have the Women in Calling Institute that we're going to be doing before Callerlab. And I thought for once I'd go to a venue where I actually would see something. I'd have a day to see something before we started. So we're going out early.
Yeah, we had thought about that, but we're not going to make it.
Packing is ensuing right now.
Okay. Yeah, we typically on Callerlabs, we either try and take 3 or 4 days prior to or after, my wife and I. But this one we don't have. We're going to drive to Wisconsin. It's about, I don't know. It's a good drive from Atlanta. We're going to take 2 days to do it, I think, just split it up. So we won't have a lot of visiting time in Wisconsin. Callerlab, though, we're going to take off on Sunday morning early. I think we get into Dallas at 8 a.m. because of the time change. And of course, we're there for all of that. So,
great.
Well, Betsy, it has been a pleasure. What's that?
We'll see you there.
Yes, ma'am. It's been a pleasure. I had no idea I was going to get some of these stories. That is just fantastic. I love those stories.
I look so normal.
I would never know you had a stab wound. That's fantastic on your leg. Oh my gosh. Yes, you are an athlete and you are a professional. I will give you that. Yes, ma'am. It is true, Betsy. It's truly been my pleasure. Tell Roy I said hi again. I saw him come in. And I will see y'all Sunday. And next week.
Looking forward to it.
It's been a pleasure. Like I said, this is going to be out in about 2 weeks, because I've got a couple that are going to come out on Friday, but I'll let you know ahead of time. Betsy, It's been a true pleasure talking to you and getting to know you a little bit, and I will see you in a few days.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
You too.